Attending a wedding, especially your wedding, can be really, really fun. But planning, managing, and creating a budget for the wedding, not so much. Hi, I'm Miranisa, a content creator from Ghana, and this is Miranisa's Mini Moments. In today's video, we are going to be talking about how to create a realistic budget for your dream wedding. A few weeks ago, I uploaded a video on 10 ways to make your dream wedding more affordable. You can find that linked up here or there. And in that video, I mentioned as my first tip that you should create a realistic budget, which led to people asking me, but how? In this video, I'm going to answer that. We're going to learn how to create a realistic budget so that the wedding planning process is as stress-free as possible. But before we start talking about weddings and budgets, if you're new here and if it's your first time seeing me, I must tell you, we have a lot of fun and good conversation and you really do not want to miss out. So go ahead and subscribe right now, and when you're done watching this video, make sure that you catch up on the rest of my other videos. And if you're a returning viewer, I don't have to talk plain to you. You already know how I feel about you. Hey. I see you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming back to watch my videos. It really, really means the world to me. Now, let's get into today's video. If you have planned a wedding or in the process of planning a wedding, I'm sure you have heard so often, create a realistic budget. And while that sounds like overused, overheard advice, it's probably the best advice you'll receive on your wedding planning journey. Because let's be real, weddings are expensive. And if you're not budgeting properly or allocating funds with some guidance, you're going to go crazy. It creates a lot of friction even for couples. It takes the fun out of planning. It can be overwhelming and it can be really stressful. So your budget and creating one that is realistic right at the start of your planning is the best thing that you can do for yourself. The first step to creating a realistic wedding budget is understanding how the wedding will be funded. Yeah, you and your partner need to sit down and have a conversation to understand who will be funding the wedding. Because there are some instances where the groom funds the whole wedding. There are some instances where it's the bride. There are some families where it's the bride's family. Some families where it's the groom's family. But you need to have that conversation with your partner and make sure that you're aligned and understand who is paying for what. Because without this understanding and without having this conversation, you might end up creating a lot of misunderstanding between you and your partner. Because I've heard stories where the bride fully assumed that the groom was going to pay for everything and was just sending him invoices, and he's like, wait, what? So you need to have the conversation. Do not assume. There are some things you don't assume. Think about and talk to each other. Hey, we're getting married. Who is paying for this wedding? Is it us? Is it our families? Have we spoken to our families? Have they agreed to pay for the wedding? Are we just assuming that you'll pay for the wedding and we're just going to tell them, hey, we're getting married, give us money? No. You, your partner, your families need to talk, align, and understand who is paying for the wedding. That's the first step. Without this first step, the rest of the steps are useless. So, you've agreed on who is paying for the wedding. You and your partner have decided to split 50-50 or 70-30 or 60-40 on your own terms, or your families have decided to pitch in. It's now time for you to decide and talk about how much money is actually available for the wedding. And if you don't have the money in bulk, you can also think about how much money would be available by the time of the wedding. And in my opinion, by the time of the wedding, is cutting it a bit too close. I think it's easier to do how much money will we confidently have by 6 to 3 months before the wedding. Because that gives you time for any eventualities, because weddings can be crazy. You have to always plan for eventualities. You decide all together, hey, by the wedding, your husband to be might say, by the wedding I can bring 50k, and then you will say I can bring 20k, and then his family will say they can bring 10k, and then your family will say they can bring 13k, and then all together you have, I wasn't doing the math, but all together you have an amount that becomes your overall budget. So you need to talk it out. And when you're thinking about how much money you have, the word is confidently. Think about how much money you will confidently have by 6 to 3 months before your wedding, or by whatever timeline you're comfortable with before your wedding. Don't start planning for money that you're unsure of. Money that's like, maybe I'll get to it, maybe I'll not. No. Think about the money that you actually have. Think about what's in your account. Think about your current cash flow, how much salary you're receiving every month. Just plan according to your current cash flow. Don't start thinking about money that you don't already have, or somebody promised me this, or somebody promised me that. Look, the people who promise you money for the weddings, it's not backed by science, but I can confidently say about 60% actually end up backing out. So you don't want to depend so much on promises. Now that we have our big budget, our overall budget, it's time to create an expense list. The expense list is a list of all the different cost lines that would come up as a result of the wedding. So the expense list can have catering, food, transport, makeup, dress, all the different things you would have to pay for to make your wedding a success, all of those things, right? Now, the expense list doesn't have to be complicated at all. It's a very simple list. I like to use Excel to just create a list, but if you're not tech savvy, you can use a notebook, you can use the notes app in your phone. Just create a list. The list is important, and you understand why soon. So now that you have your expense list, it's time to do research. Yes, we're about to do research. Now, this research is to find out the different vendors available for the things on your list, the different prices, just the different options available to you. The way I like to do it, I like to create a very simple table. So on one side and in the first column of the table, I will have all the different things on my list. So photography, food, dresses, makeup, whatever cost I will have to pay for will be in there. Then I have 3 vendors. I never settle, and you should never settle for one price quote. Always give yourself 3 to 5 different options. What I like to do is, out of the 3 to 5 different options, I categorize based on high, low, medium. High being the most expensive, low being the most affordable, and medium is like the in between. I find that this categorization is important because it just allows you to make like better decisions. Really, it just makes the decision making process simpler for you. So we've done our research. We now know which vendors are most expensive and which vendors are more affordable, or which vendors are just in the mid-range. Now we have to prioritize the list. Yes, we're about to create a list in order of preference. I know that for most couples, and especially for the brides, I was a bride, so I know there are some things on your list that are non-negotiables. They are like, you don't care if the vendor is the most expensive. That's the vendor you want. So now you have to reorder your list according to your preference, putting the non-negotiables at the very top. The cost lines that are at the top of the list will be allocated budget first. Whatever is at the bottom would get the surplus of what's left, right? So you have to reorder. So if for you, catering is a non-negotiable, it has to be men's cook. You put catering first. And then whatever you can compromise on the most comes last. Now you have your priorities list. In addition to your priorities list, you need to start creating timelines and payment schedules. So there are some couples that are very financially comfortable. They can wait and pay in bulk, but it's not the reality for a majority of couples. So you want to create a payment schedule and phase out your payment. It helps so much. So you decide, I have 6 months to plan. By week 7, I should be paying for food. By week 12, I should have paid for my dress. By week 16, I should have paid for photography. And honestly, that gives you time to get your funds in order. So if you're not someone that has a bulk amount for your wedding and you're depending on your income flow, your salary to pay for your wedding, it helps. You know that you're receiving salary end of month. You plan to have your payments in the same week. If you're creating a payment schedule, make sure that you're making payments as soon as you receive any new funds. Don't delay it. So if you know that your salary week is last week of the month, set your payments in the last week of the month so that you are not distracted by other expenses and then having to postpone payments. You don't want to do that. And if you're someone that doesn't have good cash flow, I would say that when you're making payments or when you're choosing a vendor, choose vendors that have flexible refund policies. There are some vendors when you pay them is no refund. There are some vendors that will give you 60% refund, and there are some that would give you a refund minus like a 10% fee or a cancellation fee. So these are the questions that you should be asking your vendors in choosing your vendors. You don't want to choose a vendor that doesn't have a flexible refund policy, because at the end of the day, things don't always go as planned, right? You might want to have your wedding a certain time and then something will come up, or as you're going along your wedding planning process, you find other vendors that you think you prefer to use. Now you have your payment schedule, you're following your payment plan. Always make sure you're keeping track of your expenses. Every single receipt that you're receiving, every payment you're making needs to be recorded. It needs to be recorded. It helps. And the other thing about keeping track and keeping receipts and invoices is, even at the end of the wedding, you can cross-check based on your agreements with your vendors. And then if there are instances where the vendor did not deliver as promised, you can still make cases for like refunds and whatnot. So keep track of everything. Make sure that you're doing mobile money payments or bank transfers as much as possible, because those are traceable versus cash transactions. Another thing is, get creative with spending. Look, you will find as you are crossing off your expense list and making your payments that some things are starting to get too expensive. Maybe you finish spending your overall budget and you realize that there are some things in the low priority list that aren't covered, like stationery or wedding favors. Now you have to think about how you get those things for free. So you have to innovate, you have to be creative. Maybe wedding favors, you would create something for yourself. Maybe for food, instead of doing a buffet, you will do a cocktail. But make sure that you're trying to stick to your budget as much as possible. Don't feel like because you've exhausted the budget, you want to start searching for money. If you have to borrow, it's not worth it. Being in debt for your first year of marriage is not a vibe. If you have to borrow, don't do it. Don't. And then finally, be flexible, be willing to adapt. Look, we all want our dream wedding. We all have an imagination of how our wedding should look. But sometimes it's really more about creating the memories and being financially responsible. You don't want to just spend for spending's sake, or like don't be willing to make any compromises. You will find that in some instances you would have to actually compromise on your non-negotiables. You decided you want a pistis gown, but as you're planning, you realize that it's going to take away from gaining some other things. Be willing to reallocate budget. Maybe instead of getting a pistis gown, you find another gown and it gives you extra money to cover some other lines. Do it. Don't be too rigid with your plan. Be flexible, make changes as necessary. I've been married and I'll tell you, I don't even remember what went wrong or what went right. I just remember waking up the next morning to my husband. I remember dancing with my friends. I remember walking down the aisle. I don't remember which tablecloths were skewed or which tables didn't have flowers. I don't remember any of it. And you probably won't. So there are some things that might be non-negotiables in the beginning, but at some point you would have to compromise on. Be flexible, be ready to adapt. It's not the end of the world. You will still have a very beautiful wedding. You will still have wonderful memories. You will still have beautiful pictures and captivating videos of your big day. Remember, creating a realistic budget is about keeping your sanity and not breaking the bank. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Being broke and in debt in your first year of marriage is not a vibe. If you have to borrow, don't do it. It's not worth it. Staying on top of your finances for your wedding will allow you to plan a really awesome wedding without the unnecessary overwhelm. Trust me, weddings can be overwhelming, and the last thing you want bothering you in your entire wedding process is talks about money. That is the end of my video. I hope that you found everything I said really helpful. If there are any extra tips that you know that I didn't mention, please comment down below. You already know I need to attend a wedding. If you watched my last video on wedding planning, you know that I have been dying to go to a wedding, but my friends say weddings are too expensive and they don't want to do wedding. So this entire wedding series is really my mission to make sure that these new outfits and makeup skills that I have are put to good use and I become a wedding guest soon. If you're my friend watching this, I am waiting for my invitation. Okay. Yeah, so thank you so much for watching the video till the end. If you're new here, I must tell you we have a lot of fun and good conversation and you don't want to miss out. And if you're a returning viewer, all my love for you. Really, all my love for you. Until the next video, bye!